Hi, Anushka. Very nice to see you. Hey, hello everyone. Thank you very much for being here with me today for our webinar, University Application 101. So I think we're still waiting for a couple more attendees to join in. So meanwhile, please sit back and relax, and we're going to begin our webinar shortly. Thank you. Yep. Hello everyone. For those of you who are already in the room, please wait for a couple more seconds because we're still having more attendees joining in right now. So yeah, we'll begin shortly. Thank you very much for your patience. Okay, so I think we have quite a lot of content to go through today because, obviously this is a 101 session, regarding university applications. So I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. So we can get through all the materials in time because definitely we would have a lot to cover today. If you have any questions during our presentation today, please feel free to utilize the Q&A function or the chat room function. Our host is here. So, when we see any questions, we can either, provide written responses, or I'm going to pause the presentation to tackle the questions first. Okay. So yeah, don't worry about any questions. Just keep them coming and let's get started. So before we actually go into our content of today, I would like to also briefly introduce myself so you know who you're listening to for the next, 40 minutes or so. So my name is Ariel. I'm the co-founder of Millie, and I'm also the global head counselor of the company. So with that said, I actually oversee the university applications of our Millie students every year. And, from building an achievable university list to helping students brainstorm their personal statement idea, all the way until guiding them to make that final decision when they have all the offers in hand. So I do find this a very satisfying process because I love seeing students achieving their university goals. And before I found Millie, I was actually a university guidance counselor of two IB World School in Hong Kong. And one of them is actually my alma mater, the United World College branch in Hong Kong. So you can see that, with my background, I'm pretty much an IB specialist, and I have 5+ years of experience working in education spaces, both in Hong Kong and China. Right now, I'm based in Hong Kong. So if anything you would like to ask me about, IB or about, going to, college in the US, because I graduated from Cornell University in 2014 with a Bachelor of Science in Hotel Administration. So if you want to know anything about that, feel free to, ping me after the webinar as well. Okay. So now let's take a look at today's agenda. So today we're going to be mainly focusing on two major university application systems worldwide, namely the UK university application and the US application. The reason why we're focusing on these two countries, they are very much, the first countries that students would look at when they think about studying abroad. So today we're going to decipher, how these two countries' university application system works. Also, we're going to move on to standardized testing for each respective country. The first one, SAT, and the second one, ACT, they are targeting US applications, while the Cambridge assessment would be for students who are interested in the UK, especially for those of you aiming really high for the top universities in the UK. Last but not least, we're also going to touch on a little bit about strategizing an application. So as you can see, lots of content to go through. So yes, let's get to it. So let's first start with the UK, because I always like to say that UK is definitely more user-friendly in a sense that you can see from the first bullet point on the right-hand side of the screen, you only need to produce one university application, and that leads you to a maximum of 5 choices in terms of programs or universities in the UK. So no matter which school you decide to apply in the UK, you would definitely be using that centralized system called UCAS, UCAS. So you only need to use this one platform, and you need to submit your application once, and it goes to all 5 schools. So it's definitely a very easy breezy process. You don't need to do so many different types of applications for just one country. So a lot of students really like that for its convenience and also affordability, because you only need to pay the application fee once, and it goes to 5 schools. In terms of personal statement, you might have heard of this term, personal statement. This is a statement that is basically walking the admission officers through why you're interested in your major and why is this program very important to you for your higher education. So I would say that for UK, personal statement is very, very essential, because many of the UK universities, they make their decision on whether or not to offer the place to the students by 2 things. One, your grades, and 2, your personal statement. Because let's look at the third point. There would be no interview usually arranged for any UK universities in terms of admission. So the only place where you can shine, definitely in terms of your quantitative grades and in terms of your qualitative personal statement. So do spend a lot of time preparing for that. And the no interview rule sort of, encompass a lot of the universities in the UK, the majority of them, except one for Oxford candidates. That is for Oxford or Cambridge. You would have to go through academic interview, and your personal statement sort of determines whether or not you get the interview round. So it's very important, once again. Or the second category, healthcare related industry. So if you are to apply for physiotherapy or nursing, something like that, in the UK, then definitely you need to go through, a sort of interview for admission as well, because they would like to see whether or not you have a good communication skill to use towards patient and everything. So if you want to know a little bit more about personal statement writing, actually, we would be having another session after this 101 session, right after, actually. Our host can give you the detailed time and the link to it. So if you're interested in learning how to write your personal statement, you can also join my next session after this. And some students may ask, okay, so would there be any early application opportunity in the UK? Because, you may want to secure your offer earlier, or you want to just submit your application earlier so that you don't have to worry about it later on in the timeline. The answer is yes and no, because most of the universities in the UK, you only need to meet that one regular deadline in mid-January. However, for 5 different types of students, you would definitely need to make the early application deadline. And when I say early, it's really early, for the UK. If you are looking to apply to Oxford, Cambridge, medicine, vet school, or dentistry, these 5 types of students, you would need to submit your application to UCAS on or before October 15th every year. So this arguably is the earliest deadline for global university application. And basically your application needs to be pretty much all ready when you return to school for your senior year. So definitely make good use of your pre-senior year summer to get through all the to-dos for university applications. But so, okay, what is good about applying to universities in the UK? Actually, one thing to note is that UK is very, very transparent, with their admission requirements. So if you use UCAS, apart from it being an admission system, it is also a search engine for you to research on any universities that you might want to attend in the UK. So you can see all the grade requirements are listed out. You can see that all subject requirements are being listed out. So it's a very one-stop process for all the students. You do your research in this search engine, and then you apply through the standardized platform. So with this centralized application, you can get done a lot of things in a much faster way, and you don't have to manage so many application portals at the same time. So after you get all the offers, for example, you apply to all 5 schools and then they all accepted you. So congratulations, and what happens next? So out of the 5 schools, you would have to select only 2. So you're not allowed to accept offers from all 5 schools and choose at the very end. You need to narrow down your choices to 2 schools after receiving all the decisions. And one would be called the firm offer, your dream school, but arguably also harder to get into. And then second one would be your entrance offer, because whether or not you would get the final entry ticket to the university is dependent on your final examination performance. So don't slack off. After you get the offers from these schools, continue to study hard and meet the conditional offers set by these universities. So just to show you a little bit, like the interface, how it looks like. So this is the UCAS search engine. Just type in the course that you want to search for here. And obviously your study level is undergraduate, and location, whether or not you want to be in London or like, in the outskirts, or like say Warwick, etc. Just like, put in the location here and click your entry year, and then all the courses that different universities offers would pop up, and you can do your research from there. Okay, any questions for the UK part before we move on to the US? Any questions that I can answer for you at the moment? Hey, I see no questions popping up at the moment. So if, after digesting the content, you would have some additional questions, feel free to use the Q&A function as well. So here is the US system. So now that we've gone through the easy breezy system, let's go to the really complicated one. So first of all, you may ask, so is there any platform in the US, like the UK, you can apply centrally? Well, yes and no, the answer. So you can see that, on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side of the screen, the first bullet point, there's a term called the Common App. So if you are remotely thinking about, applying for the US, Common App would become your best friend, basically. A lot of the schools, actually over 800 schools in the US, they use Common App, and you can apply through this as a centralized system. However, it's not full coverage, for sure. Like MIT doesn't use Common App. Georgetown also doesn't use Common App. So if you would like to apply to universities in the US, please feel free to check your dream school's official website first to verify which type of admission portal they use, so that you don't create a Common App account only to find out that your dream school doesn't use it, okay? But then on top, if you are to apply to more than one school in the US, chances are 90% of the time you would probably need to use the Common App. There are also other sort of centralized admission systems, like Coalition App, you might have heard of, or other, test portals that could, double up as an admission system as well. But I would say Common App is the most comprehensive. So this is definitely a term that you need to note. And second bullet point, if I say in UCAS, personal statement is really important, in the US, personal statement is definitely essential, because it's not kind of like the UK type of essay where you focus a lot on the academic. This purpose of this US personal statement is for the admission officers to get to know you better as a person. So you can see that, the statement content that they require is very personal. You're supposed to be telling a story instead of just, giving them information about your academic ability. And in terms of third point, US universities, especially the prominent ones, they really like to interview their students. So oftentimes they would give you the choice to sign up for like, optional interview with their alumni locally. For example, I was also a alumni interviewer for Cornell University in Hong Kong. So, they would be sending students my way every academic year before, so I can pick and choose whether or not my schedule permits for me to do an alumni interview with the students. So they view it as a chance for the student to get to know a little bit more about the universities from the alumni, and also for the alumni to assess whether or not the student is a good fit for their school. And in terms of early applications, I'm going to explain more in my next slide. So I'm not going to go into detail here, but yes, it is available and it's very complicated. So let's get to that in the next slide. So in terms of how to do your research, for US school, I think the best way, definitely one, attend university admission talks. Nowadays, a lot of the universities, they already provide virtual campus tours and virtual admission talks. So be sure to sign up for it and leave your information there. It serves two purposes because, first, you may be really confused, when you're looking at the, school websites. After looking at 10 schools or so, they kind of start to sound all the same and everything. So, doing admission talks, hearing from the admission officer's point of view and allowing yourself to ask questions might help you understand a little bit better whether or not the school is a good fit for you. And second, the US has a term called the demonstrated interest. With that said, a demonstrated interest means whether or not you show interest towards applying to the school, whether or not you you show that you're genuinely interested in knowing more about the school. And if you attend admission talks and leave your information there, like your name, your email address, and everything, and if you do apply to the school, they can track in their system that, oh, the students actually had attended a couple of our admission talks before. He or she signed up to our campus tour and things like that. So that's a good demonstration to the admission officer saying that you took time to get to know their school and actually you're interested in investing into researching on the school. And given how, US universities, they're not as transparent, as the UK universities, and a lot of the times you can't really find the great requirements, from their websites, I would also suggest, university guides such as the good university guides of the FISC guide. So these guides give you more qualitative information as well as the quantitative grade requirements. They would give you the average, of ACT and SAT score, average GPA of the school, how many points you need to achieve in your IB in order to get in and things like that. So I think that would be a more comprehensive sort of assessment as to whether or not you're a good fit for the school. And just like UCAS, Common App is also a search engine in a sense, because I would say that Common App serves a more technical purpose. If you want to see, hey, I want to apply to 5 schools in the US and I want to know how much work do I need to put into it? How many personal statements I need to write? What is deadline and things like that? What are the deliverables to the school when I am applying, to the school? So the Common App is definitely the way to go. You just go and make an account and see, click onto each universities and see, what kind of work you need to produce by when for each university. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to plan your standardized test. If you don't really have any concept towards standardized testing, feel free to join our Millie webinar on, standardized tests sort of preparation, or like standardized tests explained. We also do a monthly diagnostic session for SAT for free. So be sure to check our newsletter and sign up to those resources for you to understand a little bit more how standardized tests are being conducted, and also how to best scores in these standardized tests. Our test prep specialist, she would also mention the timeline for planning your standardized test. And it's always good to provide yourself plenty amount of time to prepare, study for the test, and also prepare plenty room for the test to be canceled due to COVID situation. So last year, a lot of the students, they're in the panic mode because many of their local SAT or ACT tests are being canceled due to COVID. So a lot of the time students ended up not being able to submit any test scores, although a lot of schools, they have been, accommodating towards like being test optional. However, we see that with the new trend of SAT and all, definitely having a score would be better because, not submitting the score is okay, but that doesn't mean the school won't evaluate, your score if you do submit them. So, you might risk being in a disadvantaged position if a lot of the candidates, they manage to submit the score, but then you have no score available. Okay. So going on to university application system in terms of the early application. So how does that work, for US? So actually there are many different types of early application schemes available to students, and you don't choose them. It's the universities that decide, which scheme they would like to offer to their students. So a lot of the schools, they actually offer something called the early action. And then there's restrictive early action for very selective schools. And there's also early decision. So what does that mean? And what are the differences? So actually, I can break it down for you in 4 different categories, with the first one being quota. So are you limited to, only applying for a couple of schools if you choose any given scheme? So you can see that, let's go with early action first. So for early action, there's no quota. You can apply to as many schools you want in the early phase. That's completely fine. However, I think that what is limiting your quota is definitely your effort. Can you produce so many good quality university applications so soon, meeting the early application deadline, balancing your coursework, still doing well at school with assessment, etc. My best guess would be you can at least do 1 or 2, and maximum probably 3. Don't do any more than 3 because that would be a stretch. Okay, so next is like binding. Okay, so what does that mean? If I get accepted in the early application scheme through the early action routes, do I have to go, or can I just pick and choose, after I got accepted by the school? The answer is yes. It's not binding. You don't have to go if your early action school accepts you. If you see a better fit, later on in the timeline, you can definitely pick another school. Then you might ask, so then what's the benefit? It seems pretty loose, right? So statistically, early action doesn't really make a huge difference in terms of admission rates, but definitely it's a good show to your, desired university that you're ready to apply, and that's you're interested in their school enough to place it in the early action route. So some of the schools that offers, early application, like U Chicago, U Michigan, Georgetown, they all have the EA scheme. So, if you're interested, feel free to explore a little bit more. And in terms of restrictive early action, so mainly the nature is very much the same as early action, but the restrictive part comes in the quota part. So if you apply to a restrictive early action school, you are not allowed to apply to any other schools under the early scheme anymore. So for example, remember I said for early action, you can do a couple schools at the same time, right? However, in the restrictive early action scheme, your quota is only limited to 1. So for example, if I do decide to apply to Harvard early through the REA scheme, I cannot apply to U Chicago early action at the same time. I'm just stuck with Harvard. Okay, so this is really for students who have made up their mind and it's absolutely sure that they are ready, and the grades are ready. They have really good personal statements and they really want to go for these schools. Then that it's a good scheme for them to try. But if not, you would be limiting your chances to just one school that, it's very hard to get into. So what's the benefit then? It's actually quite difficult to say because look at the profile of the schools that offer REA. We're talking about Harvard, Stanford, etc. So these schools, they're already super hard to get into. So applying early, does that give you very much advantage, in terms of getting admitted? not really, the stat is still very low, but it's, if you think that you're ready, and if you think that your application is already perfect, the best as it can be, so just give it a try. And my favorite, I would say, would be the early decision scheme. So quota, in terms of quota, you're also limited to just one early decision, but you can apply to early action as well, on top of the early decision. So a lot of students, they would do like maybe 2 early action plus 1 early decision. That gives 3 choices in the early application round. However, the main difference is the binding issue. So if an early decision scheme decided to grant admission to you, like say if I applied to Cornell via the early decision round, if Cornell accepted you, you cannot choose another school to attend other than Cornell. You're supposed to drop all the rest of your application and just, directly go to Cornell. This is because it's called an early decision. So when you apply to a school via the ED scheme, it means that you've already made up your mind that if the school accepted you, you would definitely go. So, I mean, no one's going to handcuff you and ship you over there to the school, but definitely the consequences can be huge. For example, definitely, blacklisted, in the school. Also, your high school would also get blacklisted, by the university, because it's the counselor's responsibility to ensure that no students would be turning down an early decision agreement, and the only breakable time would be that the university is not offering enough financial aids for you to attend. If it's financial issues, you can back out from an ED offer, but otherwise you would have to stick with it. Okay. So moving on to standardized testing. So you can see that, traditionally there are 2 types of SAT tests. I'm going to go into that, for SAT 2, but some of you may already know. So let's go through the SAT 1 first. SAT 1 is the reasoning test, our SAT diagnostic, the one that we are hosting every month for free. It's actually the reasoning test. There are 2 sections of the test: the evidence-based reading and writing, and math. So overall, 4 subsections, 2 testing your English, 2 testing your math. And then actually before, there is an optional essay component, but together with the subject test, actually College Board got rid of the 2, both the optional essays and the subject test by actually end of this month. So good news for the students, you no longer need to study for your SAT 2 anymore. Going back to SAT 1, each section score 800 as full points. So, you can see that for the highest achievable mark, in your reasoning test would be 1600. So the reason why, SAT test got canceled, it's definitely due to the fact that COVID has changed the landscape of SAT testing a lot. And a lot of schools, they have been going SAT optional, and in terms of SAT 2, a lot of the universities, especially the prominent ones, also migrating from having their candidates, submitting the SAT 2 scores. So in the end, College Board decided to phase it out. If you would like to register for the official SAT test, you can do so at www.collegeboard.com. The link is already down below, so you can feel free to screenshot for your own record. Okay, so ACT. ACT is a very close substitute of the SAT 1 test. So I would say that they're interchangeable. So if you are applying to a college in the US, you can either submit your SAT 1 test or you can submit your ACT test. So definitely interchangeable. And usually colleges have no preference of one over the other. There are 4 sections in the SAT test, in the ACT test. One is English, and then math, reading, and science. So you can see that for ACT, the sort of like one thing that sticks out, from the SAT test is science. So by that, they don't really mean hardcore science, actually. It's more like, for students to complete with just good common sense and logic, so that kind of science. So don't need to worry too much about it. If you're unsure about, whether or not your science ability is able to, enabling you to take the ACT test, you can just, go online and search for some past papers to check out the question type. There's also optional essay, for the ACT test. So be sure to also, practice with that as well and read the marking schemes to see which parts you're not getting score in. For the composite scores, ACT is scoring out of 36. So each section, they have a full score of 36, and then they would take the average and then have the composite score also based on, 36. So, for better schools, or like the top schools, actually, you should be aiming for 34 or above. So before, it is actually quite common for students to supplement their ACT with SAT 2 subject tests. So they submit, the whole sets with 2 different types of test results. However, right now, without the SAT 2 test, you can just submit, your ACT and your in-school transcript. One thing to note is that starting September 2018, ACT is conducted computer-based. So basically, you would be looking at a computer screen and then clicking your answers into the test paper. So if you're the type of students that like to, jot down notes on test papers, highlight everything, this may not be the best option for you. So yeah. But do bear in mind that actually, the traditional paper and pencil test, it's not available anymore at this point. Okay, for students who are interested in, Oxbridge application or sometimes Imperial applications, for certain majors offered by these prominent universities in the UK, actually you would probably need to take written assessments called the Cambridge assessment. So there are many different types of Cambridge assessments, and they managed to devise, a test for every single major, almost. So there's BMAT for medicine, MAT for math, HAT for history, and many, many more. So, for example, so you may ask, where should I be taking these tests? So quoting my current base as an example, in Hong Kong, there are definitely a few Cambridge Assessment Centers available, to our students. But the most prominent one is actually the British Council. So British Council is available worldwide. So you can check near your living area to see if there is a British Council available for you to, do these tests in. At the same time, your school, if you're studying in an international school, it could be a Cambridge Assessment Center as well. So that means your teacher will help you request the, Cambridge Assessment paper, and then they will ship it to your school, and you only need to take, the test at school. So this is actually very, very, easy arrangements if your school is a Cambridge Assessment Center, and you can take the test in a very familiar space with your teacher being your proctor. So do inquire with your in-school counselor to see if your school is a Cambridge Assessment Center, if you would like to apply to schools like Oxford, Cambridge, or Imperial. On top of Cambridge assessments, there are also like other types of standardized tests, in UK. So for example, LNAT is for aspire to law students. UK CAT is a close substitute for BMAT, but then they appeal to different sets of schools. So do check the website, the UCAS website very, very carefully to see which test you really need to register for. Because if you don't, do the test, if you don't submit the score, basically your entire application, it will not be processed. So make sure that you remember to register and take these important admission tests. Okay, on to our last part of the application. So I would like to suggest a few strategies for you to, first conduct your university research and understand how many schools you should be applying to, etc. So most of the international schools, or most of the schools, they would set an upper quota as to how many university application sessions they are able to support. For example, my previous school set a quota of 10 sets of universities. So you're not allowed to apply beyond the 10 quota. So it's very important for you to strategize, really nicely, so you won't run into a situation where you don't have any university offers. So the safest way to do it would be to dissect these quota into three categories. One being the reach category, match category, and also the safety category. Reach schools, students usually know this is basically your dream school, right? So a lot of students, they have no idea picturing their dream schools. They always know the ones that they're most interested in. However, for the match and safeties, they often ignore because they would think that, probably they would want to place all their hopes into their dream schools. But the reality is, you are more prone to, if you put all eggs in one basket, you're more prone to, having not a very satisfactory university offer results if you don't place or diversify your risk in the match and safety categories. So normally I would recommend my students to pick 1 to 3 schools in the reach category, depending on how many quota your school is giving you. So these should be the relatively competitive and very challenging schools to get into, such as the Ivy Leagues or Oxbridge. And the match category, it would be, consisting of your majority of university choices, around 4 to 6 schools. These schools should match your grade and test scores in school. And that, you would think that based on the admission rates, previous years, you would have a good chance of getting in. So this is a match school versus a safety school. So safety school should has the highest admission rates, over the year. For example, over 50% of admission rates. That would, and then with academic requirement very suitable for your current standard, so that it's called safety. Usually suggesting 2 to 3 schools in this category. And a lot of the time students like to, like randomly put schools in safety categories because they don't want to think about it. But chances are sometimes you really need your safety offers. They ended up being the schools that you actually need to attend. So students would be regretting that they didn't spend as much effort thinking about whether or not the safety schools suits them. So don't let that happen. And on top, just one more reminder. Reach, match, safety categories don't just rely on your test scores and things like that as the indicating factor. Actually, whether or not your family is able to afford the tuition fee is also very important. So if you do need a suitable amount of financial aids or scholarship in order to get in, and you don't know that for sure whether or not you can be granted that amount, be sure to put that in the reach category. As long as one very important factor in whether or not you can attend that university, it's very uncertain, very blurred, definitely put that in the reach category. So into one of our last slides. So the resources that you can use to research on your university and start, building your university list. The first one is actually relying on the rankings. So I know students really like to take a look at rankings. So some of the good ones, the Times Higher Education, it's usually the ranking that I would use or refer to for global ranking. So we can see universities from all over the world, and they're being ranked, according to, their rigor, in terms of academics, a bunch of other variation factors as well. So this is a good one, for you to compare universities across the globe. And you can also filter it by your desired major or academic area that you're interested in. So I feel like, this could be a very good choice, if you have a desired major in mind and you would like to compare, globally, which universities are good at your chosen major. And then for the US oriented one, you have the US News ranking. And for the UK one, you have the Guardian League table. And if you would like to conduct more general research, once again, for UK, visit the UCAS search engine. For the US, try to use the college guides, try to use the Common App to gauge the workload, and sometimes for College Board, so that you can plan your standardized tests in advance. Okay. So thank you very much for being here with us today. So now I'm going to take any questions that you might have. Any questions? Okay, so if there's no additional question, oh, actually there is one. Okay, Anushka is asking, is there a disadvantage of not taking the SAT or ACT? So actually, for the school that sits, basically they are SAT or ACT optional. What that means is, if you don't submit, they are not gonna, not take a look at your application at all because you didn't fulfill the application requirements, right? But then I think it's not really a disadvantage, but it's a comparison. For example, like in the COVID year, a lot of students didn't get to take the SAT or the ACT due to test center cancellation and things like that, right? So obviously that's situational, circumstantial. So there's nothing that the colleges can do about it. But then there are still students who manage to submit the score, so they would take that into consideration. Right. So if you don't have it, it's not really a disadvantage because a lot of students also fail to submit the score as well. But then if you have it, and then you score well, that's even better. So I would not see it as a disadvantage, but it's more like, when you are comparing yourself to students from around you, especially after the COVID turmoil sort of settles down a little bit this year, especially in the US, there are a lot of students that are going back to school, normally. So there would be more students submitting their SAT score. And now the SAT 2 is canceled, we see more importance being placed on, one, the students in school grade, and two, the SAT 1 test score, because that's basically the only standardized test left, the SAT 1 and the ACT. So I think for this upcoming admission year, if you can try to lock the SAT score in or ACT score in, so it can help you build a better academic rigor or a better academic profile in the eyes of the universities. I hope that makes sense. Okay, any additional questions? Good question, by the way. Okay, so if there is not any additional question, I hope to see you guys later in my personal statement webinar. So yeah, hope to see you there. Thank you.